In this lecture, we look at why evaluation is such a critical part of crowd management. We start by understanding the purpose of evaluation, not as a blame exercise, but as a structured way to learn from what actually happened. We'll identify the key dimensions that need attention, from operational performance to communication. And we'll look at how to evaluate the effectiveness of crowd management measures so that future events benefit from past experience. We then move into the practical side, how to apply structured evaluation methods to reconstruct events and interpret data. Evaluation is only useful if it leads to improvement. So we'll discuss how to synthesize findings into actionable recommendations. And finally, we'll look at common pitfalls, the patterns that repeatedly undermine organizational learning, and how to avoid them. Why do we perform an evaluation? First of all, evaluation helps us understand what actually happened, not what we assumed would happen. It allows us to learn from both successes and failure, and to improve future events by building organizational memory. When done well, evaluation strengthens accountability and trust, both internally and with partners. It signals that we take learning seriously and that we're committed to continuous improvement. An evaluation has several dimensions, which all should be addressed. We begin with the evaluation of the operational performance. Here we look at flows, bottlenecks, and the locations where queues, delays, and high densities occurred. We also examine the interventions that were used. Were the right measures chosen? Were they applied at the right time and in the right place? And were they scaled up and down appropriately? These questions help us understand not just what happened, but why it happened. Next, we evaluate the use of monitoring tools and the IT environment. This includes the availability and usability of tools, dashboards, sensors, radios, and apps. We assess data quality. Is it complete, reliable, and latent? And we look at human-system interaction. Did operators understand and trust the tools? Did their actions align with their monitoring signals? Technical issues such as outages or integration problems also play a major role in how well operations perform. Information use and decision-making are central to any evaluation. We ask how monitoring information was interpreted, how quickly it was translated into decisions, and whether key signals were missed or overemphasized. This helps us understand whether the decision-making process supported or hindered effective operations. A fourth evaluation dimension focuses on the level of service and scenario deviation. We examine which level of service targets were met or exceeded, and where level of service dropped below acceptable levels. We also look at how deviations from planned scenarios were detected and handled. This helps us understand whether our planning assumptions held under real-world conditions. Organizational and communication aspects are often overlooked, but critically important. We assess whether roles and responsibilities were clear, whether communication between control rooms, partners, and stewards was effective, and how cooperation with external stakeholders functioned. These relationships often determine how smoothly operations run. Where so far we looked at the dimensions of the evaluation itself can be performed using different methods. Data-driven evaluation methodology uses monitoring data, such as flows, density, weather, and transport information. We compare conditions before and after interventions, and we compare planned scenarios with what's actually happened. We also look for patterns across previous events. This helps us identify recurring issues and structural improvements. Qualitative evaluation complements the data. We debrief operators and stewards, interview partners, and gather visitor feedback through survey or social media signals. We reconstruct timelines to understand how events unfolded. These insights and context nuance the data alone cannot provide. Triangulation means combining quantitative and qualitative insights. We cross-check data with lived experience, identify contradictions, and uncover blind insights. When number and narratives align, we gain confidence. When they diverge, we learn where to investigate further. Triangulation is essential for a balanced evaluation. Now that we have seen different evaluation methods, it is important to realize that evaluation only matters if it leads to improvement. The first step to reach improvement is to translate findings into actionable recommendations. We distinguish between operational improvements, like adjusting routing, organizational improvements, like clarifying roles, and strategic improvements, like updating long-term planning frameworks. Recommendations must be specific, realistic, and linked to clear responsibilities. Next, we embed lessons into future planning. This may involve updating scenarios, adjusting level of service thresholds, improving monitoring setups, or changing training and debriefing procedures. The goal is to ensure that lessons learned become lessons applied. Finally, we want to institutionalize learning. This means that we want to create a culture where evaluation is routine, not exceptional. We document lessons in a structured way and ensure knowledge transfer between events and teams. This prevents organizations from repeating the same mistakes and helps them build long-term resilience. When we look back at evaluations, the same patterns tend to repeat. And it is good to be aware of the common pitfalls in evaluations so that these can be avoided. One of the common ones is the blame the person story. Rather than to point to someone, it is important to look at the bigger picture. The system might have forced a certain behavior because there was no time or too many things at the same time to be done. Another familiar problem is that we only looked at the event day. By the time the event day arrives, the mistakes are already baked in. So not only in the preparation, also in the planning, we should look at those issues. Then there is the small things don't matter trap, which is about small things that are ignored during operations. But those tiny deviations are like hairline cracks. They show you where the structure is under stress. Ignoring them means missing the early warning signs. And of course, we all know about the stories about those beautiful evaluation reports that nobody uses. But as a result, that the same issues reappear as if nothing had been learned. Finally, there's the we'll fix it later pitfall. Recommendations that never got followed up. Without a clear owner and a deadline, lessons fade, and organizations end up relearning the same lessons again and again. These stories remind us that evaluation isn't just about documenting what's happened. It's about creating the conditions for real learning. To conclude, evaluation strengthens planning, monitoring, and operation. It builds resilience, reduces uncertainty, and supports long-term improvement across events and organizations. When done well, evaluation becomes a strategic capability, not just a report, but a driver of better outcomes.